excited to have a special time this afternoon to really focus on one of the issues that unfortunately has been plaguing our industry for years. I know in 2019 we hit a record we didn't really want to hit, with the largest number of recalls for foreign material in meat and poultry products in history. And we'd really like to not get there again. So obviously over the years, it's been a huge focus for our industry. I'm Casey Gallimore, Director of Regulatory Policy at the Meat Institute. So it is something that's very near and dear to my heart, and that I've been hopefully helping to deal with over the last several years. So we're very grateful that you guys are dedicated professionals here to try and work on foreign material while we're here. Quick show of hands. How many of you have dealt directly with a foreign material incident in one of your facilities? How many of you have had a foreign material incident where you found all of the foreign material and everything was fine and you got to release all your product? Oh, wow. I'm excited for you people. You can tell us all of your success stories and for us to do that all the time now. So, obviously it's a very complicated issue, and we're very excited for FlexRay's sponsorship so that we can have this session today and dedicate this time. So I won't take up too much more of your all's time. I will be around making sure that you participate and ask questions and speak up, because we would like for this to be as interactive as possible. For those of you that know me, I have no problems putting people on the spot. So hopefully we'll get some good discussion here today, because we all learn better together, and food safety is not competitive in our industry. So, but without further ado, I will introduce our moderator for the panel. Happens to come from our sponsor company, FlexRay. Kurt Westmoreland is the Chief Commercial Officer at FlexRay. He's got 35 years of experience in food safety, so this is not the first time he's probably talked about foreign material, as you might guess. His early career focused on analytical testing, and then did sales, commercial operations with Marion Nutrisciences for, we won't say how long. I've already said he has 35 years of experience. And he's been an active member in several industry associations, including a special one to me, the Meat Institute. So very grateful to have Kurt here, and he'll introduce you to our panel speakers.
Thanks a lot, and appreciate you not talking too much about the number of years in the industry, so that was good. All right, so the panelists, if you guys will go ahead and come up, and I'll start introducing the panelists as they're coming up. One thing you'll see on the agenda, if you got the full thing, is we were showing initially that Kai Luker is going to be a presenter or one of the panelists, but he's actually going to be presenting in the next session, so he won't be one of the panelists. So we'll be moving forward with there. So first on the line down there is Brian Covington. Brian is 25 plus years experience in food safety. It kind of hurts my feelings. I wanted to say 35, Brian. I wanted to put you right up there where I was. 25 years across a range of different food segments. He was with Keystone Foods for 17 plus years. Served as Vice President of Food Safety and Quality for Lopez Dorado for the last 5 years. So Brian, very much appreciated. And then we got Tabitha Milligan. Tabitha has got a long track record in the poultry industry, over different products, different locations. Was with nearly 18 years at Purdue, and then from there, she was, or at the same time or prior, she was with Wayne Farms in Tyson, and now she's Director of Food Safety and Quality over at Pico Foods. And then we have Jared Kersey, and Jared's the Vice President of Food Safety, Quality Assurance, and Regulatory Affairs for Althea. Has been in the regulatory on the pet food safety arena for quite a while. Really, with the early career work, we was working with trade associations, interacting with the Food and Drug Administration, Center of Veterinary Medicine, and Association of Feed Control Officials. So he's had roles with Procter & Gamble, IMS, I'm not even going to try to say the other one, American Feed Industry, Mars. So he's been around the industry for quite a while, in multiple degrees in his field, and a PhD from the University of Arkansas. So Jerry, we appreciate you being here. So the first thing we're going to do today is, this is truly an open panel discussion. And when I say that, I want you guys, this is, really the agenda that we'll be following. But this first part of the open panel discussion, I really want you guys, as we're going through this, to ask questions as we go. We don't have to wait until the end of this thing. We're happy to wait till the end because we've got a Q&A session. But we've got a lot of good panelists up here, got a lot of good knowledge of the industry. And so we're going to be teeing up some questions for them so that they can give you some feedback on what they've seen in terms of foreign material in the industry. But it's really important for you guys to interact with us too and give us some of that feedback. So I'm going to start with Tabitha, and then you other gentlemen, if you want to give some feedback on this one as well. But with the product line that you're dealing with, Tabitha, what are some of the key foreign material or the main foreign material challenges that you see?
I think one of the biggest opportunities is being able to detect some of the plastics and conveyor belt pieces, those types of objects, because there's really nothing out there. If it's not a buoyant enough material, it won't pick up in the X-ray systems or the metal detection. So I think it's those materials that aren't as easily detectable without some other form of inspection.
Okay, great. Brian, Jared, you guys got any additional feedback on other challenges outside of just plastics?
I mean, the plastics are tough because you can't detect them, but the metal is still an issue. On the beef sector, for as much work as we did for years on buckshot, we have seen buckshot increase the last 3 or 4 years, and it's a conundrum because the detectability and the capability, when you're talking about large grind operations and trim, trying to get that buckshot before it gets to your grinders is hard. So I think you can't exclude metal as a challenge as well.
Yeah, and we all know that metal's the most prevalent that we see out there. But to your point, Tabitha, we know that plastics are very difficult. Jared, you get any additional feedback on this one?
No, I think that sums it up. Whereas the metal, I feel like I can sometimes do something. On the plastic, I'm just at a loss, and it's visible in product, and you can't see it all even when you go piece by piece on an inspection. And it's all about a company's profile, also, like on what kind of risk do you really want to take. And it's not that's usually a pretty small reward for a lot of risk financially. So. And as you see, different companies have different mindsets on that. And
I won't belabor the plastic challenge, because when we talk a little bit earlier around from the FlexRay perspective of what we're doing, Kai's our chief technical officer, and he can speak to some of the things that we're trying to do to help with plastics, but it's still a challenge. But we'll speak to that a little bit later on. Brian, one of the things that we get a lot of questions around is how do the agency requirements, or in some cases the lack thereof, how do they really impact the decisions that you look at from a foreign material standpoint?
I think it was spoken to earlier. When you're talking about finished product and you're in essence talking about one verified complaint in the field becomes a recall, you have to be conservative with your decisions and your risk management decisions relative to findings. It puts a lot more onus on your defense programs, your risk analysis programs, and then what your guys are doing every day. I'll tell you that the thing that scares me more than anything every day is our people and doing what they're supposed to be doing. You can have all the programs you want, but executing them, you basically have to execute them 100% at all times now, or from a regulatory perspective. And a customer perspective, you're going to have some heartburn.
Either the other panelists get any feedback on that, or Brian summed it up pretty well?
I think Brian summed it up pretty well.
Okay.
General concerns across the industry.
Yeah. The one thing Brian did mention was, if you've got suppliers that have been a challenge, and you've got foreign material challenges, and Casey mentioned in my bio, I came out of the food testing business on the lab side of the house. And one of the things that we did a lot over there were vendor monitoring, vendor certification programs around microbiological, chemical, physical tests, and those kind of things. And one of the things that we've started to see at FlexRay is an uptick in that look. If you've got suppliers that have been challenged suppliers in terms of foreign material, how do you monitor those? How do you look at them? Obviously, you're not going to do it at the same level that you are from a microbiological or chemical standpoint, but there are opportunities to look at challenge suppliers and around risk management programs, and how often should you look at a truckload of product to see if there's any kind of a problem there. And that is something that we've seen as a bit of a trend in the marketplace that's starting to more closely tie with what you often see from an analytical standpoint. So Jared, got a question for you here. So what type of form material processes and systems are used or considered, in your situation, to limit the issues and address the challenges that you guys might see?
Well, I mean, metal detection, X-ray, these are the things that we use. But I would say that supplier piece is another valuable tool that you have as well, because it's not only the tools that you use in-house, but it's the extension of where that raw material came from that you're using. And so inspecting those people and seeing what they're doing and working very closely with them, I think one of the things that you were saying made me think back and everything, because everything is a risk profile. When you have a documented event in the plant and then you knowingly release it, you automatically are elevated on that situation. And I never will forget, this has been some time ago at a company a long time ago that I was working with, and we had a foreign material that they had cleared it at the plant level and said, yeah, everything's good, we recovered everything, there's no way this, blah, blah, blah. Heard it 100 times, right? That, oh yeah, that piece of equipment that went into that mixer, we recovered every bit of it. We weighed one that's exactly like it, and then we put all the pieces back together, and we've done, like all of this. And anyway, so I heard that, and I never will forget, at that time we were doing private label work and co-man work. And next thing you know, I got co-man's dump of their consumer complaints, but this is like the product had been in the market for 6 months, and they dumped the complaints, and I go, what, that corresponds, I'd look back through the records to this day that they had a documented event, and I'm like going, well, something's not right here, It was not. Literally 4 hours later, another company contacted me and said, hey, we've got this metal complaint, and I'm sitting there going, wow. So about 6 weeks passed, we went through a recall. And I want to tell you, it was ugly, was not a fun one. That was on the pet side at that time. And FSIS and obviously an FDA have a different approach on this. FDA essentially, they almost allow an event to happen at times, because you only see them a couple times a year on inspections and stuff. Or if you've harmed a pet or animal, or they found an event or something like that. But anyway, I never will forget, they had an event very similar at another one of our facilities, and I was on the phone with the ops manager, and I was on the phone with the president of the company. They were trying to do what to do with the disposal of this product and everything, or disposition, shall we say. And I'd already told them, I said, well, I'm not signing off on it, so you just need to know I'm not comfortable with it. I said, but the bigger question is for y'all, like, we just went through a recall 6 weeks ago, and now is the time to lean into a risk, That's not the time to lean into a risk. So I think you have to take some of your business acumen skills also, and then you don't even have to have the debate about whether you scientifically can rationalize this or not. And then you can just be good business people and say, this makes no sense. We're not going to put someone at harm. We're not going to put our brand at harm. We're not going to do any of that. So that's doesn't really answer the question, but it's
No, it did.
It is what I'm thinking.
No, it did. But the thing that's interesting too, you mentioned co-packers and the challenges associated there, and you alluded to this, and I think it's important as you think about that is when you're doing your due diligence of co-packers or doing your due diligence of new suppliers, how do you build the review of the foreign material into it from a risk management standpoint to make sure that there's not an issue? You immediately, as part of that due diligence, you dig into the foreign material records and If they're not there, you do some inspection to make sure there's not a problem. So
Right.
you kind of alluded to that. Tabitha, Brian, you guys got any additional feedback on that one? Okay. All right, so Tabitha, since you've got the mic right there in your hand, so it's your turn. So, a lot of times we know that food safety in general is food safety, quality assurance. Those are the people that are involved in managing the programs. When you're looking at things, within your company from a foreign material standpoint, what other disciplines or levels within the company outside of just food safety get involved in decision making?
Sure. Well, it's cross-functional. Our food safety teams, obviously are multidisciplined with operations, maintenance, even safety and human resources to an extent, because they're responsible for, training new hires. Maintenance is responsible for maintaining the facility, and operations is responsible for, best practices compliance. So I think it's not all food safety and quality. It takes a village. I say it probably once a day to someone that, we have to constantly be looking at this with a different set of eyes. I'm not going to look at it the same way as a maintenance person or an operations person. They're going to maybe look at things a little differently than I do, but ultimately you have this cohesive group that, whatever it is, writing a new program or reviewing an incident that did happen in the plant, or just how do we go and look at our operation each day with a critical eye and determine where our biggest risks are, and do we have programs in place or do we need programs? So I don't think it's an all food safety or quality. It definitely is a team effort, and it has to be cross-functional for sure.
Yeah. Brian, you got any feedback on that one?
No, Tabitha's absolutely correct. There's different lenses that everybody looks at an incident through, and you need all of those perspectives collectively to make the decision. But the number, as I tell my team and our leadership team, for me in the food safety quality position, my number one goal and lens that I look through is brand protection, customer protection. So I personally don't ask how much is this event going to cost us. I have some general idea, but that's not my job. My job is to make sure that the product we put out the door is safe. And if you're in the FSQS, you have to always have that lens first when you're trying to make decisions.
And I think it's a great point. And, we do see within the work that we do a lot more operational involvement, I think, than we used to see on the micro and chemistry side of the business. And to that point, and because your job is to make sure you got safe product out there, from an operational standpoint, it's like, what is it going to mean to our production, to our supply chain, and the whole thing? So you got to get everybody involved, to help make those decisions. All right. So Brian, while you got the mic close over there, when you're looking at the business, how does a proactive root cause investigation help you guys limit foreign material issues?
Well, I mean, you hope that you've done the proper risk assessment, whatever tool you use. We personally use failure modes and effects analysis, but I mean, in essence, it's HACCP, it's preventative controls. It's understanding your equipment. It's about culture and training with your folks. It's about empowering your people on the floor to make sure that when something is not right, they say something. But the flip side to that to me, and this was a thought I had a while ago, the biggest thing we struggle with is because who has extra people? Let me rephrase this. Who doesn't get any pressures from upper management about head count and justifying your staff and how many people are on the floor? Okay? So we're asking people to do more and more and more. And one of the downfalls to that is it's a struggle to get all of those different perspectives in the room together to do a true, proper corrective action root cause analysis to try to figure out why something happened. And that is a huge challenge. On top of capital is harder to get, so equipment gets older, PMing it. We all, we're, I guess, almost 5 years removed from COVID now, but who didn't have any issues getting parts or anything for any type of equipment really over the last 5 years? So that's a challenge, but you have to have the fundamentals, but ultimately it all gets back to culture and your people understanding what they're seeing and saying, and then being empowered to stop a line, notify, so you can investigate and minimize the impacts if possible.
Yeah, I think it's a great point where you're talking about empowering the people to be able to make the decisions, because the last thing you want is people afraid to step up and make decisions and make the calls that they should make. So, Tabitha, you got anything else on this one?
Yeah, I agree with Brian. I mean, it's all about a preventive culture. And I think it's kind of twofold when you talk about our team members or employees, associates, whatever your company refers to your human resources as. But I think the other piece or the other side of this is not just empowering them to let us know when there's an issue with a product or a condition that could potentially cause a foreign material introduction into the food chain, but to recognize and reward those team members that do come forward, that do, hey, could you take a look at this? I mean, if you show that, hey, this is important, you've taken the opportunity, and we want to recognize you for that. Success breeds success, right? So I think rewarding and recognition is a big piece of that too when there are opportunities.
Yep, great point. Jared, you got any other feedback on that?
I mean, I love the point, because last week or a week before last, I don't remember. Anyway, somebody in our plant raised their hand and went, "Hey, this isn't right," and they shut it down. And I'm hearing line time and this and that, all the normal things. And I'm not, bashing anybody, because I know that we have to run plants, to do this and everything. But I literally just sent a note to that tech on the line and said, "Hey, I'm going to be up there in a couple of weeks, and I would love to take you to lunch or dinner or something, and just tell you how much I appreciate it, because it's not just the fact that, I said, it was great you did this, but I said, showing up 24/7, 7 days a week, going through and doing those things that you need to do." And I tell people all the time, I said, I can't really impact quality the way I want to think I can. And I said, because I'm not there at 1 a.m. when the plant's running and something goes wrong. And if somebody on my team feels empowered, and they all have heard it from me, I know, whether they truly feel empowered, because I know I'm not there in the moment, I don't have a line supervisor over here or whatever, but letting them know that, hey, I'm going to stand beside you and behind you 100%, and nothing's going to happen. This is the type behavior that we have to reward. And so reinforcing that, I think, is really important, and so that's why when they highlight something, I go, hey, it's not much for me to buy somebody a lunch. I got to buy one anyway. So,
all right, Keith, since you got the mic, we'll get the next question to you then, Jared. So, and you've alluded to this a couple of times, but within the business that you're in, what kind of proactive processes do you guys currently have, or that you feel would be more beneficial to enhance your program in terms of being proactive around foreign materials?
So you probably need to know I made a transition almost 6 months ago to a new company, and going in and rebuilding a lot of the things I've built when I've gone from one company to another. This isn't my first time doing this, but going in and saying, okay, it starts with my contracts and the people I choose to do business with. I mean, it really, really does. Mm-hmm. I mean, quality and food safety, including foreign material, starts with that. So I'll give you an example. If you were to go look at pet food processing today and how fish comes in, good chance you're going to find a hook. I'm going to tell you right now. Mm-hmm. But a lot of those things are preventable, and working with the right suppliers to reduce and minimize those type of things, and them have preventive steps in their process is really important. And then it's building the team and on. So, yeah, okay. I guess it's what I got for that.
Tabitha, Brian, you guys got any additional feedback? We'll make sure that's not my phone. That's
Yeah.
not-
Shouldn't have started.
I know mine's on mute. I know that
Go
much.
ahead.
Yeah.
I thought it was ESPN. No, but
Could be.
go ahead.
Yeah. There's nothing going on today anyway. So, no, I think when you look at that, what programs, I think the more programs that we have that are proactive and at the beginning of the process, right, or the various points within, the better off you are. I look at foreign material prevention, similar to pathogen control. There's no one magic bullet that's going to take care of a pathogen or eradicate a pathogen, or at least reduce the occurrence of it. It's the same way with foreign material. There has to be a multi-hurdle approach, and it starts at the beginning. Even out on the farms, chickens will eat anything, and we know that, and we've heard it in many, many years.
Seen it.
And yeah, I've got like 100-year-old Indian arrowhead in a chicken before, so it's not uncommon to find that. But I think, encouraging those best practices in the field with our growers or farmers as they do clean outs, to just make sure that they put a magnet to their four-wheeler and ride through the house. I mean, those types of things. Anywhere we can push it out further, and then certainly what we do as soon as those chickens and that product starts to move through the process, everywhere we know there's a potential control there, we should be implementing and then verifying that those are in place. And it's an everyday thing. It never stops.
Great. Fried, you got any?
Hey, I've got one more thing I was thinking of.
Absolutely.
So the one thing I was thinking of is how many times that I have had a piece of equipment break, and we've had a foreign material in the process, and then we go back and we start checking maintenance records and everything, and well, was this missed? Was this done? And then evaluating the frequency against the recommendation of the manufacturer of that piece of equipment. I mean, simple little things like plates, and I can't stress how much attention to detail in that area in your maintenance team that they're actually reviewing on scheduled basis. And guess what? It doesn't have to wait till that end, of the full year that we review that or inspect that, because you can see a lot of times in equipment cracks, wear and tear, all the type things that are,
Sure.
like they're telling you, like we're probably gonna have an issue, and then you've got it, and now you've not only got that, but you've got additional downtime, you've lost product, et cetera, et cetera. So that to me is a really big one.
Yeah. And before we forget, and this is one area where sometimes it is forgotten, but our sanitation crews, our cleanup crews, they take belts off to clean, they break equipment down, how they handle that, and how they put equipment back together, and some of the creative tools that we can find in the plants that they use to help clean. So I think never forget your sanitation crew and what's happening there, and visit them on a routine basis just to review their processes as well.
I've never heard it called creative tools. I like that one.
At least I should have started with this, and I think these guys would agree. We're giving you things we've learned through experience. We are far from perfect.
Absolutely not.
I'll tell you, I've lost a whole day of beef production, and I'm not going to put a number on it because one of our maintenance folks left an open-ended wrench in the Formax when they put it together, and it sat there all day going through the screw, grinding. And then you've got pieces missing, but they're small enough that FlexRay, there's detection limits, and you got to make decisions. So experience is a great teacher, unfortunately. The other thing in all of this with the risk is never accept the status quo. Challenge your maintenance folks, challenge your ops folks, because they will, a lot of times, because they're so busy, they will give you an answer that they think will satisfy you so that you can move on. I've been involved in a situation, never trust the manufacturer's diagrams either. Whether it's AutoCAD drawings, PDFs, whatever, I've been in a situation with a blender that ultimately we had a gasket next to a seal bearing that wasn't on any of the drawings on the drive shaft. And I mean, you don't take this part of the blender apart, every night, and eventually it broke. And when it broke, then it wore itself out and you had to take it out, and that's how we found it. So 99% of the time, those drawings are going to be correct, but that 1% can cost you a lot of money, and it has for us.
Yeah, and you guys, I think all of you guys mentioned maintenance and how maintenance ties into this. And we'd mentioned plastic as being difficult to find, but low density rubber gaskets can be very difficult to find via X-ray as well. And one thing that we've seen in the industry is food safety quality working with maintenance, working with procurement, starting to look at those type of components that might be in the system that are difficult to find, that are low density, and having those ran through via X-ray just to make sure you can find them. And if you can't, as you go through and do your preventive maintenance and you replace, now your procurement team can start working with suppliers to find components that are actually X-ray detectable, because the reality is things are going to happen, and when it happens, you want to be able to find it, to be able to get it out of your product and keep as much as you can in commerce. So that link to maintenance is key.
And you make that point, and if you talk to your maintenance folks, a lot of them don't like the metal detectable gaskets because they don't last as long. So you have to then adjust your PMs and figure out that frequency for checks, whether it's daily, weekly, whatever, depending on your situation. So if you make changes like that, you got to make sure that you go back and redo your risk analysis as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, got a question?
We hear from a lot of our customers or people that contact us on the metal detectable ones. They don't really know what the life is. So like Brian said, if you do change that, be really careful between the chemicals you use, how often it's cleaned, where it's at, those kind of things, that if you change to those things that you have a good idea, because I don't know if anybody really knows when they become non-metal detectable, and then you think you're improving the system and maybe you're not. So just keep that in mind.
Correct. Thanks, Paula. Tabitha, you got more feedback on this one?
We're good. I love the gasket conversation. I mean, so the other piece I will tell you is that if there's a possibility for you to engineer gaskets out of your system, going gasketless is the absolute best way to go, and just using a sanitary connect anywhere it's possible.
So, audience participation. How many people have, I'm just going to use gaskets because gasket seals, those are all great ones, but how many people have a program to where if you're changing a gasket or changing a seal out, that one has to go back to the maintenance room before the parts room will give the maintenance employee a new one? I see 1, 2 hands.
It's a great process.
We're now considering that.
Yeah, a lot of us. That's good.
If not, now again, you got not living in a glass house here, because we've not executed against that, but that has also saved us, because when they bring those old ones back, or if they come to get a new one and they don't bring it back, your parts guy goes, "You're not getting it," and then it starts an investigation as to where is the old one, or you're bringing back and pieces are off, and okay, what are we doing? But that is a really good best practice for your maintenance and your parts guys, is one in, one out.
Well, and can I just add too, the parts room, parts guys, parts lady, parts room, whatever you call it, those people can be your greatest partners with a foreign material control program. For a couple of reasons. Number one, things like that. They can be your first line of defense for controlling how much really goes out onto the floor and verifying what comes back. Second thing I find very useful with those folks is if you have something that you don't know what it is, take it to the parts room. Yeah. And they'll be like, "Oh, this is this obscure part that goes to this weird machine that just easy button, parts room, guys."
Yeah, great point. So this was a good segue to the next question, which is yours, Tabitha. Because we're looking at things that are hard to find, looking at maintenance issues, looking at challenges. So when you're looking at your inline metal detection, potentially inline X-ray, what are the things that you look at in terms of inline X-ray versus a third party, light flex ray? What are some of the things that you're evaluating as you're looking at that?
That's a good question. So if you're looking for an inline system, I think it's you want to look for one that's fit for purpose. I mean, if it's what detectability do you want? Are you looking, and it should be throughout your process. I mean, pre-grind and post-grind, typical places if you look at it from a risk perspective. But I think just the detectability for the purpose that you're using it for, because products are different, chopped and formed versus whole muscle. I think looking for third party to me is more of a verification. Like, I want to test and see what my systems are doing, send it out and have it verified. Or, even with all of the programs that we have and all the best practices and all of the awareness, incidents do occur. And I think that's when you look to the third party. Is this a possibility to help us work through a particular incident, or can I use this third party to verify these various systems that I've put throughout my process?
Okay. Right. Jared, got any feedback on that? We'll speak a little bit more to it when we do the FlexRay presentation, because Kai's got a slide specifically around inline X-rays versus third party and the things that you're looking for, because it's there are challenges with both. But as a third party provider, frankly, we wholly support the use of inline X-rays as well, because we know the value that they're bringing to the industry, and we don't look at it that it's taking business from us. Probably the alternative, we probably look at it as, hey, people are finding things now that they didn't know they had. But you're finding things earlier in the process, so you can see what you've got there, you can make the right decisions, utilizing those as indicators of what's going on, and then you can try to keep as much product in commerce as possible versus waiting until you have a major, large episodic event, so you can get ahead of it from that perspective. So Jared, go ahead. Somebody got a question? Sorry.
So we hear a lot about best practice, great programs and processes in place, and then you hear about the people, right? And it's new hires, transfers in or out of a department. What have people seen in the room or on the panel? What have you seen as far as hiring and training and that type of thing that has really helped in the people area?
Yeah. I think one of the best things is actually familiarizing let's look at it new hire perspective. I sit in a classroom for 2 or 3 days. I'm going through the orientation. Now I'm going to take you out on the floor. I'm going to walk you through this process. I'm going to show you exactly what we talked about in this classroom. And I think we have to be extremely hands-on. There are constant questions. People aren't going to ask questions in the room typically, especially new hires who are nervous, and it may even be their first job. So I think that, having a hands-on approach once they make it out to the production floor, that's the most critical piece in training. We can read, we can discuss, we can talk about it, but until we get out on the floor and walk them through these processes and make sure that they understand, and then the constant, feedback and follow up. If it's a team huddle every morning, pick a topic and, hey, or we did have an incident. I think we have to discuss those incidents more and not just, okay, we dodged a bullet, right? What did we do? What could we change? And just continue to push that down to the floor and not just leave it in the classroom.
Plant culture, to me, dictates some of that. We actually have tried to go away from the initial 2 and 3 days sitting in a classroom. We get through the basics, we get through the safety, we get through the GMPs, and then we actually put them on the floor for a day in the shadow so they can actually see the process, and then we bring them back. They're not on the line. But then we bring them back in when they have a visual and start discussing some of that. The other thing, our IT group doesn't agree totally with me because they use cybersecurity, but training has to evolve. Quite honestly, training has to evolve to Reels, Snapchats. I mean, something in 15, 30 second, 45 second blurbs, visuals, because that's how people learn today.
Yeah.
It's the PowerPoints just don't get it anymore. And we've had more success when it's video and get them live and just give them little snippets versus the 2 and 3 blasts or the week, whatever it is. Each plant's different.
That's a great question. Anybody else in the audience? I'm sorry, Cassie.
I'm so glad that you said you're starting to move away from the sticking them in the classroom for 2 to 3 days. I feel like we've kind of gone full circle on that. And I will say I felt so much better when we had new hire training where at the time I was the head of our food safety arm and I went to every single new hire training. They saw me. I gave them my hand washing class in person. They heard from me about foreign material and then they saw me down on the floor. And I think that interaction between the people who are really running your food safety, whether it's a food safety supervisor, your manager, whoever really is running food safety and cares about food safety and is your passionate person, your champion in that plant, they need to see them. They need to see them in person. They need to know who that person is. They need to feel comfortable coming up to that person in the flesh. They wanted to just record me. And I said, I'm not the same in a recording.
No, absolutely. Anybody else got feedback on this? Because this is great discussion.
I've got something if nobody else does. It's interesting. I love that challenge on that question because, especially coming into a new, job and everything, and looking at the different cultures of plants and people and so forth. Mm-hmm. And I'm 100% with you. We've gone to this 45-second TikTok learning, and we have like videos that play all the time and little. They're flash type things, and it's just constant content, that is a reminder. But I will say this, and it can be for any food facility, in my opinion, but in pet, you really have to work really hard on that one because they don't think of pet like what's the risk, right? that brown around kibble, right? I mean, they don't think of the risk and everything. And then when you sit down and start talking to them and you personalize food safety for the individuals, so you say, hey, they said, guess what? We know that our kibble goes into the kitchens of, 60 million homes a year or whatever the number is, and you lay that out for them and you go, and here's the problem, and let me explain to you why we do GMPs, why we do food safety this, why we do whatever it is and everything. There are people's children who literally, we've all seen it when, they crawl across the floor, reach in that dog bowl, and they grab that thing. And guess what? We know that you better be really good on managing your food safety program when they are putting it. I'm not just talking about foreign material. I'm talking about, salmonella or anything else. When you personalize it for them about how important it is and everything, when you talk to, I saw a recent video and I thought it was really interesting. Maybe it was a commercial, I don't know. Anyway, it was the guy who de-ices the plane, okay? And he was saying, when I train somebody on this, he said, I tell them, I de-ice this plane like my family is flying on it today. Mm-hmm. And I thought, wow, I don't know about y'all, but I looked out the plane the other day when I was somewhere, I don't remember where, but anyway, they were de-icing it. And I thought, I hope that guy takes it as serious as the guy I saw in that video, And it was literally a 30-second video. But it made it so personal, and that to me is almost what we have to do now to create the quality cultures that we want, is to make it personal for them. It has to be about them and their family, because we all know otherwise you just come in and you're punching a time clock and all that kind of stuff. But it makes you slow down when it's personal.
Yeah, it's great feedback, and it pretty much ties to the next question I was going to ask. Brian, this one's yours, and you had alluded earlier to the first thing you're doing with the company is you're making sure you're protecting the brand. And you're protecting the brand, and obviously the social media impact, protecting the brand. Now you got the reels and those kind of things. When you think about it, how does the impact of social media that we see in society today, how does that impact what you guys are looking at, or how you look at how you handle some of these challenges?
Well, first off, if it's on TikTok, it must be real. But there's used to be the fear. That 25 years, appreciate that. But even before me, that other 10 years, when there were actual Polaroids, which by the way are coming back. You worried about somebody taking that on the floor and taking a picture. I'll tell you, one of my biggest struggles internally is our supervisors and management at multiple locations feel like they have to have their cell phone on the floor because that's how they communicate. And I'm like, you are giving every line employee, you're telling them, no, you can't have it, but you have it. So what culture are you setting? And then you're giving them an opportunity to say, you're better than me. And you're giving them an opportunity to pull it out and say, well, you guys did. And when they pull it out, they're going to take pictures. But in terms of, has it changed how we have to, or we manage our program? No. Has it changed how we have to deal with complaints from customers and our media teams and those things? Absolutely. But fundamentally, it doesn't matter if someone, puts it on Facebook, takes a Polaroid, whatever. It's just how you deal with that, but you're still investigating at the plant level and you still got the same fundamental programs. It's just, I told somebody this, in fact, I think I told Bill Griffith, Tabitha's colleague, I said, he and I were talking about being elderly now and it didn't used to be like this. I said, it was. I said, but now because of social media, in 3 minutes, it's everywhere. So your reaction time to things, you don't have a day or 2 days or 3 days. You've got minutes and an hour or the rest of the shift to go out and try to figure out what happened and how big the scope is. And that's what's changed. And that's what social media has done because customers feel the pressure.
The truth hasn't changed.
No.
So Tabitha, I want to kind of tie these next two questions together. So when you're looking at an event, your situation, let's call it an opportunity. You're looking at a foreign material opportunity within your facility. What are some of the things that you go through in terms of managing with your team that you're looking at to make a decision? Do we send it outside to a third party? Do we landfill it? What do we do with it? And then if we do send it out, do we do further forensics on the product to see if we can identify where it's coming from?
There was a lot all at once. But yeah. So I think when you have an event, the number one priority at when you know that it's happened and you come to that realization is containment. I think having a firewall, if you will, the number one priority is establish a firewall and make sure that you still have control of the product. I think that's priority one. And then looking at the product itself, there's what is the material, what is the introduction point. Obviously, chopped and formed products have a higher risk than a whole muscle product. Do you have an in-house offline X-ray system or metal detection system that you could run that product back through? Or when you go and you can't piece together the gasket or you can't piece together all of the parts that you need and the sizes that you don't have the capability for, that's when you would reach out to the third party and see. There are going to be times when it's like, yeah, we already know that the third party is probably not going to be able to detect this. And so at that point, then you make that decision to dispose of product, unfortunately.
Okay, great. Brian, Jared, either one of you guys got anything else on that?
No, I'm good.
Okay. All right. So, one of the next questions here, Jared, we had this one lined up for you. So when you're looking at product and you see you have an opportunity, how do you make a decision on whether the product's fit for purpose?
Well, I was thinking when Tabitha was speaking, and it's interesting because I would love to have a beer and just talk over, because I'm with you. I totally agree with you that food safety is first, but I do look at those numbers so that basically so ops knows that I'm looking at them, because they always want to say, well, they threw away blah blah blah, whatever it was. I'm not worried about the figure. That's not my interest. However, it's a valuable tool when you go, we would take a risk for $15,000. Are you serious? I mean, what are you thinking? You can really use it as a valuable tool when you do that. When you look at it and you say, I've got an opportunity, what I always say to my team is, guys, if you're going to collect this data, what are we going to do with it if the number is this? What are we going to do it if we find that? What are we going to do with it if it's that? So we can come clean and just say, get rid of that and move on, and we don't collect that data. But once you do that, you're going to have some information, and you're going to have to respond to the information that you chose to collect. And so the second thing I always do is I say, well, what would have to be true for you to say, yeah, I am good with this? And then I make them kind of play out scenarios. I'm not really good at it myself, but they're really good at it. And then they get into it, and the teams really start thinking more quality mindset that way. But I think that's a good tool with any team, is to question, well, what would have to be true for that to happen? Okay, so I hear you. And what would have to be true for that to happen? The next.
It's like
scenario.
a 5 why.
Yeah, almost like a 5 why.
Yeah.
Now, I agree. And in terms of that disposition, it's obviously the type of foreign material, your confidence that you can detect it and you've got it and find it, it's experience and, have you dealt with it before? And then it's that risk, that you talked about.
And sometimes it's, last week I had this, and here we are again, guys. Why am I here again? No, we're not even playing that game. Just moving along. And it's almost like I know it sounds like a punishment, but I'm not here to come in and sort your problem every week,
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point with that. This week and then next week is be very careful. I would always caution, be very careful what you consider an isolated incident. Because not all isolated incidents are isolated incidents.
Right.
There's just no other way to say that.
Right.
Yeah. Right. And, I did say that I don't ask the dollar.
Yeah.
If there's, what I've found is if you can come up with an internal metric that can assign a dollar value, whether it's on a per pound, per event, whatever, that you can talk to your accounting, your finance teams, your ops team, you put it back to dollars for them, and they're much more likely to respond. Even though it may not be an accurate dollar figure, if you can just say, this incident, when you looked at your overall production for the day, it cost you, over every pound you produced, it cost you, 15 cents a pound, whatever that number is. Yeah. And they're much more likely to say, okay, now I get it.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to do something about it.
Yeah.
Well, and that,
go ahead, Cass.
That price tag, I think, can work. It's a lot more than that.
I think that
you can use that number multiple ways.
That's exactly right.
Would you make a different decision if it was $15,000
Yeah.
because it was cheaper?
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. You hit the nail on the head. The point is like, you want to know because your ops guys are doing this, but I'm also tying it always back to like, here's what we saved y'all. Let me explain to y'all, because we didn't have these events and we actually fixed them so they didn't occur. Mm-hmm. We did our the maintenance checks that we should have done. Guess what? We learned from plant A to plant B that you can't go 6 months on those plates. They have to be replaced at 3. And so you start finding ways to get better and use that information.
Well, and a lot of that too is, you think we're talking dollars of what it costs to redo it, but a lot of times what gets lost in the wash in these discussions is what does it mean for your customer? Downstream, now you're having to short customer orders, and now you're not getting product out into commerce, and then you got to go back and reproduce. I mean, there's so many things that end up tying to it.
Yeah, I think the other piece of that, when you look at it from the financial perspective, is if you are having a routine event and you know that there's a detection system that would help prevent those, then you've got the justification for a return on investment. Hey, we've spent X on this event 4 times, 5 times now, and here's the dollar value associated. We could have bought 3 new X-rays or whatever. So I think you have to also look at it, the financial piece from that, and improving the process and showing what capabilities we could have, and if we just spend the money that we've already spent on a problem.
And Brian, you had mentioned it earlier. I'm going to put you on the spot with the agency question, but you also have to look at it based on whether or not you're dealing with USDA or FDA, because they handle these things differently, and you've got different approaches that you're going to have to address from that.
Yeah, but I mean, Tabitha said it. You got to have a firewall. Either agency in any event, particularly if it gets outside of your walls, you better be able to justify where the out of bounds is on both sides, and you better be real sound in that, or they're going to get you, and they're not going to take your word for it. You're going to have to prove it. So that's the hard part about this, and every situation is different. You can have guidelines, but every situation has to be treated individually in terms of how you manage product disposition and impact.
Absolutely.
Well, you just opened up a can of worms there. Brian, how do I define the beginning and the ending of a foreign material incident? How do I define my scope?
Well, it's what's known, first off. And again, metal detector hits does not mean that you found it all or you don't have a problem. But if you've got, sporadic, let's just say you get 2 hits on a line, at 8 a.m., you go 25 minutes, you have 1 hit, then you go another 10 minutes, you have another one, and you go, oh, well, those are far enough apart, they're isolated. Maybe they're different batches, whatever. But then when you step back and look at the day, you see that over a 3-hour period, you've had 12 hits. Well, to me, that's when you start to say, okay, I've got to look at this as an event versus isolated. And that's where you have to have that knowledge of not only the agency thinking, but just quite frankly, the experience to say, this is an event, okay, how is it all the same type of metal? Is it all, where's it all coming from? But then I'm going to say, okay, I got to take more than what's on each side, and then I got to start digging down and figuring out if I can separate this or not. But the biggest thing is recognizing that it needs to be treated as an event and not every one of them is an isolated incident.
Great. So this was a good question, a good topic. We got a question here from the audience.
So when you're talking about events and thinking back to vetting your suppliers, and say a supplier's giving you you find pieces of glove or belting and trim and 3 cases out of a day's pack. Do you have suggestions for linking the incoming product for events? Breaking down per pack day, per kill day, because going to fight suppliers for reimbursement when you found it in 3 cases and they're all from the same pack date is not an easy task.
Can you throw in some whip there as well?
Yeah.
To make it a little easier?
Incoming plastic.
Yeah. So
Got it.
where did you find it? Did you find it upon initial inspection where it's isolated, you know it's that supplier, that PO, you can take it to that pack date, pictures, that documentation. The challenge you have is once you, like if you're a grind operation and you're mixing fat and lean, or it gets into your process further, then they can challenge that. But if you get 3 incidents in one pack date from one supplier, and well, hopefully they would all 3 be similar types of findings. If they're not, then that's another conversation. But it's really, to me, it's all about where you found it and can you definitively prove it's them, and then you take that back to them. And if they challenge that, then that's when I think some of the other decisions with your other partners in your business to say, okay, what are we going to do here from a raw material perspective with this supplier?
Great. Any other audience feedback on that one? You got something?
I did have something I was going to tell
Yeah.
you. Maybe this will make y'all smile. I know it's been an hour talking about foreign material, but I never will forget. We had a foreign material just like you were describing. We had a hit and then a hit, and so the line guy calls the maintenance over there. I need you to check this. It keeps going off, and I'm not, and everything. He goes, okay, checks it. He said, yep, working, logs it in the records and everything. Like an hour later, he's like going, hey, this is doing it again and everything. He comes in, checks it, and he goes, yep, it's working. I looked at the records and everything. On the third one, which came about an hour later, he goes, in the record, and you might want to, this is just a learning, maybe it's working, exclamation mark, exclamation mark, exclamation mark, which is great for records, as you can imagine, when you get an investigation, when something happens. But my point is like these guys, you pay attention to that. It's like, you're calling over it. You're not finding the foreign material is the reason that it keeps going off. So, but yeah, I just remembered that, and I thought it was you reminded me of that time. I appreciate that.
I think in this room we could be here till tomorrow at this time and all have stories of things that have happened in the
Crazy.
plant.
And how many of them can boil down to raise of hands? Who has ever heard themselves saying or heard a colleague saying, well, that's never happened before?
Yeah.
And then it does. All right, so I've got one final question for the panel. We've got about 10 minutes left, and I want to make sure we have time for questions. And this is really a real general question for all of you guys, but based on the things that we've talked about and the feedback you've given, do you have any additional recommendations that we haven't talked about that you would suggest that people look at in terms of enhancing foreign material programs and processes they may have in place?
Not any additional recommendations, but I would only say that this is a daily battle, that as soon as you think that your program is where it needs to be and your people are where they need to be is when you're going to screw up. You have to reinforce this every day, every day, every day. And it's a challenge because you have to change the tone, the message, and how you send that message, but the message has to be sent every day about the importance of this.
Yeah, I agree with Brian, and it's really important. And I would also just caution with that everyday focus, what are the times a day where events are more likely to happen, like before break times, end of nights, end of shifts? Those are times when I know people are ready for a break, they're ready to go home, whatever, but that's when we're most vulnerable. So knowing your operation and your schedules and where your vulnerabilities are as you look at it every day is critical as well.
Tabitha hit on this one, but I am a big believer in watching the process and seeing, because you learn so many things about what people actually do when they're on the floor, and I think that is to me that's a really valuable tool. I'm not gonna lie, the camera technology makes it valuable at times too, because you can see, and they're more in their native habitat, if you will. when they don't feel like you're standing right there watching and everything. And it's not to play a gotcha moment, it's to learn, like, because a lot of times, we're people and we do shortcuts that we don't realize the impact that they may have.
Great. All right, so great feedback, very much appreciated. So before we close this part of the session, open floor. Anybody got any additional questions or comments? We've got a couple here.
We talk about culture and rewards. What have you found to be effective rewards for your employees without, one of the concerns with like reporting foreign material events and rewarding them, where do you get to a line where they're going to start finding foreign material events?
Yeah, that's a good question. And people are, when you mention the reward system and recognition, that's always a concern. They don't have to be elaborate rewards. $100 gift cards are not necessary. Sometimes it can be as simple as a thank you card signed by operations and food safety leadership when those events occur. Even recognizing in the team huddles, at the start of, hey, John found this yesterday, did a great job. Let's all keep our eye out for that, or anything else. I think the less elaborate it is, the more meaningful it is, the more personal I think it is.
Correct. Casey, there's a question right there.
I think we all have some foreign material metric tracking that we do, but that's really kind of a lagging indicator. When it happens, it happens. What are y'all's thoughts on more leading indicators for foreign material findings? Because that's something I really struggle with.
What do you?
It's tough because whether it's a metal finding, somebody physically seeing it, or an X-ray finding is your detection is lagging. But I think once you do that, the only way you can get to a leading indicator is truly go back and evaluate. Like if it's equipment, you gotta be good at tracking what you attributed the cost to, and then look at your PM programs. How frequently are we looking at stuff? But on a very basic level, and I tell my team this every time we have an event, the first question I ask is, do we have the product? It's a whole hell of a lot easier to release product from hold than to go get it. That's right. So if you have something go wrong, even though it's lagging, make sure that you have the product, or you understand your indicators within your process. You're looking at those real time enough to where you still got product. But that's a really tough question to answer, at least for me.
And you may, findings by area could be one. Incidents by area. If you were to put a big map of your plant, a schematic of your plant up, and you put an X every time there was a finding in a color-coded thing, and then maybe that metric of finding per area, and that's from the beginning of the process to the end. That could be kind of an indicator metric of your food safety team would want to look at regularly. It's just a suggestion, and I've seen that in previous lives. So,
Right. Yeah, that's a good. Yeah.
Very good question. Anybody else?
I would also echo,
Go
Tabitha earlier mentioned your sanitation team. Your sanitation team and your maintenance team, equip them with the authority to say when they think something is wearing down. Obviously, foreign material comes from all sorts of places, not just equipment. But if your sanitation team can tell you, I've been cleaning this belt for 6 months and it has looked better, that might be an indicator that belt's going to fail soon.
Yep.
So equipping them with that authority.
So, got one in the back row by there.
In regards to quality inspection, what you've just mentioned, when you're on the end of the line with the quality inspection, it's very late in the process. You've said it's difficult to trigger the originator of the event. So the question to you guys would be, there's a lot of different technologies which you can implement in preventing these things going into your machines and then being sliced up, metal contaminant being in the slicer. You will have then multiple contaminants on the processing line. What's your perspective on putting more machine protective metal detectors or X-ray machines that it can first of all detect the contaminants much earlier in the process, and secondly, prevent your machines of causing further damage. But then in the end, you will still need your end-of-line control systems. But I think it might be a smarter move to go early in the process. And I would be interested if somebody here is thinking the same.
How many people have a metal detector before product goes into your grinder? Go ahead.
I mean,
Did you do that before or after you broke your grinder?
yeah, I mean, I'll go back to Tabitha's point earlier about you just have to put a business case together and return on investment, and does it fit for your process? I mean, there's some things that I've approached our engineering team with, and they go, we just physically don't have the space to put it in this line or that. But it's all about the business case and the ROI on those things and how often things may occur, as would be my response.
And I think there's and always on the lookout for new technology. There's AI and there's camera systems now, and a lot of companies are bringing that to the table, and finding this next technology and that goes beyond X-ray and metal detection, because again, multi-hurdle approach, and there are certain things that X-ray and metal detector won't pick up, but maybe AI will, or if get further down the road where we're doing MRI technology in the plants. I mean, always being on the lookout for that next great technology, and if that fits for your operation, I think is another key.
All right, great. I think we got time maybe for one more question. Anybody got anything? All right, got one right in the front.
So we're looking at using magnets, and I work at a pork plant. We're looking at magnets. We're looking at using a gun that you hold on metal and it can read out what type of metal that equipment's made out of. Have you guys had any experience with that? Either from a threshold when it comes to the magnet side, or looking at a gun and trying to identify where it's coming from?
Now, I have no experience with the metal gun. Is that something Wade's looking at and implementing?
I can tell you we haven't seen them, but we have seen some customers that have looked at them. I think from what I understand, I don't want to overspeak, but I think their calibration is key. You got to make sure they're calibrated correctly, and how you're using it and kind of the decisions that you're using it for. But from what we've seen, some of the rough data we've seen, there's some promise there. It depends on how you're going to use it, though. We got our technology guy back here. There's a microphone for you right there.
While I'm en route, I will say I have mixed results with magnets. It really depends on the product that you're working with. They are really great for some products, but it also depends on the metal you're looking for. If you have a factory full of stainless steel, there's no need for you to have a magnet in that facility. And if you said you work at pork, right? Pork is the worst fat and the stickiest fat. And so if the magnet can't physically grab what you're pulling off, it's not going to help you either. So magnets can be super useful in certain situations, but they're specific.
So the XRF technology that you were talking about, I'm an advocate for it, understanding the type of metal that you're getting and using inside of your plant. The unfortunate piece of that is the pieces and sizes that you're finding on your metal detector and your X-ray. Those aren't large enough yet for XRF to be able to tell you that that's your metal and link those DNA types back together. You have to have at least 4 to 5 millimeters in size on that XRF gun in order for it to tell you what that DNA on the metallurgy looks like. So yes, do it. Absolutely. Take all the notes and take all the data you can ever collect whenever you're collecting data. But there are limitations to XRF at the moment.
And that's a great transition because Kai is our technical speaker for our next talk, and I think we're right at the end of this one. So, panelists, great job. I've done several of these things with roundtables and whatnot, and your transparency with the information you've shared has just been great. So very much appreciated. So everybody give the panelists a round of applause.